skipping breakfast, and especially if you're doing it more as a pattern than as an exception, is often linked to other unhealthy lifestyle practices. We're far enough after potluck. Hopefully you got past your sleepy stage. I'm going to test you to see if you are. This morning, what did I talk about in the health bit? Breakfast, I did. And I talked about mostly some adverse links between missing breakfast and some health issues. Do you remember what either of those there were two, either of those two issues were? Uh-oh. Heart attacks. Not stroke. So it was increased occurrence of atherosclerosis, also known as hardening of the arteries, and then higher incident of heart attack or death due to coronary artery heart disease. But those studies were conducted on whom? Men. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, women. Let's turn our attention to you. So with the men, the biggest study that I had looked up was one that had followed 27,000 men for 16 years. But there was a study also out of Harvard. They looked at 46,000 women, and they monitored them for 6 years. At the end of that time, do you know what they found? There was a correlation between women who avoided breakfast and development of type 2 diabetes. So no matter how you look at it, probably, now there are situations where healthy adults, skipping meals or fasting from time to time, or under certain health conditions where in order to kind of reset or rest the digestive system and the body, it's recommended that you fast. But on the basis like what I was doing, where I was fasting and not eating, not necessarily a good thing. But they also have noticed, and this is a global thing, they've done studies in Sweden, in Australia, in Canada, in the United States, and they're finding that more and more young people are skipping breakfast. And depending on the study that you look at, it's anywhere between a quarter and 33 to 36% are going to school not eating breakfast. Now, there's been some controversy back and forth about whether skipping breakfast is a way to help you lose weight or if it actually causes people to gain weight in adults. However, there does not, from what I saw, to be any controversy about that in children. Young people who skip breakfast later in life will have a tendency to have gained weight. But here, listen to this. Here are some of the other things. Now, this might be, sometimes it's hard, especially if they're a teenager, to try to talk them into eating breakfast because I'm too busy, I've got to rush to class, I'm too tired, I've been studying all night, whatever. But maybe this will get them. I thought this was interesting. I had never read this one before. Do you know what one of the number one side effects in teenagers for skipping breakfast is? Halitosis. Do you know what halitosis is? Bad breath. So maybe if they knew that it was giving them bad breath, 50% of them who had bad breath were not aware that their breath was bad. So that can affect them actually socially and as they try to interact. But on a more serious, maybe a more serious note, in Sweden, they looked at some of these young students who were not eating breakfast. And they found out that later in life, what happened were a few things. The ones who had skipped breakfast had poorer health outcomes later in life, that it seemed that it set habits young that they carried into adulthood, which kind of makes sense. That's not very far-fetched, is it? There was there was an increase in the development of metabolic syndromes. And those are the things that are, it's one of the risk factors for coronary vascular disease. They noticed that there was decreased ability to concentrate, that their mood was unstable. And we thought it was just because they were teenagers. But their mood was unstable, and they had less energy. And then, as I mentioned, there's increased weight or even obesity as a result. And, you have to consider that young people are in the phase where their bodies and their minds are growing rapidly. They need that food to fuel them. And when they're not getting that, in young people, the tendency is as they feel tired, they will just grab fast snacks, which often aren't good for them. So the bottom line, as I stated this morning, there hasn't been shown to be a causative effect, but more a link between this habit of not eating breakfast and these other, which can be chronic and serious health conditions. But here's the thing to keep in mind. It's not enough to just eat anything. So when we talk about eating breakfast, it's not just grab anything and eat it. Still want to make sure that it's a healthy and nutritious meal that you're eating. So if you think back to this morning and you realize that you skipped breakfast, I encourage you to take an honest look at your lifestyle, because as I mentioned earlier, skipping breakfast, and especially if you're doing it more as a pattern than as an exception, is often linked to other unhealthy lifestyle practices. And so take an honest look at your lifestyle habits and consider if there are things there that you could improve. So this morning and this afternoon, I've talked about breakfast. Breakfast because it's important to power our minds and our bodies. But you know what? There's another kind of breakfast that we can partake in. That's the spiritual breakfast. Morning, I have found, is an amazingly wonderful and rich time to spend time in the Bible and time in prayer. And spiritual breakfast will nourish you for the whole day. So I want you to remember to daily include breakfast, both physical and spiritual.